Hello and a very warm welcome to this special presentation. NDTV and Roli Books presents a one-of-a-kind experience, a debate like none other. A decent debate, a good debate. We are calling this series India Debates. In its first edition, we are going to concentrate on a very significant issue, something which touches our lives each day, every minute, every second, because this is part of the technology we carry with us. It's become an extension of our personality. We are talking about social media. A lot has been associated with social media. It has liberated a lot of people, but at the same time, it causes a lot of heartburn as well. So, where do you stand? Has social media done more harm than good? That's going to be the debating point. Let me introduce the guest that I have with me. Senior journalist and writer Rana Ayub is with us. Thank you very much, Rana, for joining us. Raghu Kannad, another senior journalist and writer with us. Thanks, Raghu, for joining us in this debate. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, apart from having a very long biodata, I think one point that needs to be mentioned here, that he was among the first, in fact, the first Indian politicians to be on Twitter, and up until very recently also the most popular and the most followed. So he will have a lot of experiences on how social media has affected him, his experiences of social media in the past and now. And we also have senior writer as well as journalist Yashika Dutt. Thank you so much, Yashika, for joining us. The format of this debate is going to be very simple. Before we allow a free-for-all where all of you can say and do what you want, and interject very openly, here is a minimum opinion guarantee that we offer right here of allowing each of you speakers 3 minutes of time for your opening comments. So let's first begin with you, Raghu. The debate is, in a democracy, social media does more harm than good. I believe you're going to speak for the motion. Your time begins now.
Thank you, Sanket. Now, I believe modern democracies have something they very urgently need to learn from modern science. And it's this, that good information doesn't have much to do with your personal beliefs or your biases or your ideologies or even really your good intentions. Good information is the result of good practices. So we don't really have to agree with each other's beliefs about the world. We just have to agree on a method to establish a common reality. Now, the scientific method is pretty simple, really. It's a set of rules and protocols that guide research. It reduces error, and it allows verification, and it creates the common ground on which all scientific knowledge stands and grows. What scientific method does for technology, the way it creates knowledge that works reliably, journalistic practices and other professional practices do for democracy. They create good information that allows democracy to work. Now, obviously, these are very different kinds of knowledge, but they share the same basic, quite boring principle, which is that there is no capital T truth. There are only professional techniques and tools, and standards and practices that make information more truthful. And those practices can be improved, they can evolve, and they can become more inclusive. But cut to the present, fake news tweets, WhatsApp forwards, what is it that makes these so pernicious and so dangerous to our society? It isn't just that they are bad information, it's that they exploit the credibility that the written word has had. And it has had for a reason, which is the reason that I just described. Social media has taken on the mantle of news while erasing any concept of standards. Now, these platforms are designed by the richest corporations in the world, by the smartest engineers that they can afford. But by this design, the information that deserves to spread is whatever fires our emotions and gratifies our pre-existing beliefs. This design tears societies apart to polarized camps that can only mock and despise each other's information and each other's basis for reality. And at the same time, social media kills and sort of cannibalizes the professions that can create good information and can and can create a shared and can unify society and hold powerful people accountable. Social media is actually de-educating us about where good information comes from and what the truth
Sure.
practically look like.
So, Raghu, I think we'll get more time perhaps for you to elaborate further on what you said, but that's all the time we have for the opening comments. 3 minutes are up. Let me now go to a speaker who's going to speak against the motion. Again, the topic is, in a democracy, does social media do more harm than good? I would like to invite the opening comments of Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Well, I agree with Raghu that social media does what he says it does, but that doesn't prove his proposition that it does more harm than good. That's what we're here to debate. I would argue that the harm he's mentioned is outweighed by at least 5 kinds of good that social media does. And I'll give you examples of all 5 in the 3 minutes available. Number 1 is increased communication, multiplied contact amongst people across borders. I'm old enough to remember the days of writing an aerogram and sticking a stamp on it, whatever, waiting 2 weeks or more for a reply. All of this has been replaced by instant free contact on social media. Social media gives you a chance to keep your friends updated, to make new friends. You get contacts across a political divide. It's impossible practically for Indians and Pakistanis to travel across the border to each other. They can keep in touch and do on social media. There are a number of peace groups, youth groups, and so on. Social media can help you create new knowledge networks you never had before, disseminate information you find interesting, keep track of the world beyond you, well beyond what's available in your daily newspaper, because of the various links that people you're following will be posting. And it allows strangers to connect on a level playing field. For instance, I've made a number of connections to foreign opinion makers through Twitter, foreign ministers, even others, a forum that doesn't belong to either of us, but provides us a neutral platform to engage. Second big gain, social media has democratized the space for thought and has allowed the outsider to find a space in the public narrative. So in the past, views were monopolized by a certain group of people we can call elites. There was a class basis to this. They had their authority, like the speakers for the motion here, their newspaper columns, they appear on TV debates, and they essentially upheld their monopoly through barriers to entry for others. Cost of publishing, lack of educational pedigree, opportunity to have access to the various gatekeepers, editors, and so on. Now, social media has neutralized this proposition. Everyone's a writer, everyone's a journalist, everyone's a reporter. Similarly, in politics, I mean, the BJP will tell you that they felt they were not getting a fair shake in mainstream media. I mean, that seems funny today when the mainstream media is all about their message. But they used social media during the 2004 to 14 period precisely to develop an alternative vehicle for their messaging. And today, of course, they've used social media extensively to cement their dominance in politics. 5 lakh WhatsApp groups. 82% of all Indian mobile phone users have downloaded WhatsApp. So there's social media that has entrenched the rise of an alternative political party, overcoming the traditional monopoly of let's say, my side. And we've got 560 million internet connections in India, upwards of 80% on mobile phones. It's growing every year. So the opportunity to change is there.
Rana Ayub now speaks for the motion. Again, the topic is, in a democracy, social media does more harm than good. Rana Ayub, your time begins now.
Well, Sanket, I'd have loved to agree with Dr. Tharoor, because I remember when I joined social media in 2011, it kind of amplified our voice, our stories, our journalism that we did. My book was a self-published book and became a huge bestseller. But in the last couple of years, I have realized that it has unleashed a monster in us. I remember 2 years ago, my image was morphed on a porn video and circulated all over the country. Had it not been for social media, it would have just been on somebody's WhatsApp or somebody's phone. 2 years ago, I was almost on the verge of a breakdown. I was almost on the verge of deleting my social media, because it was a mental trauma to have this obnoxious image flashed all across your social media, on your Instagram, on your Facebook. Not less than a month ago, I've had to file the 4th police complaint. 4th FIR has been registered against a group of people who have given me death threats, rape threats. So this is, in a way, it kind of takes you back. I mean, look at what's happening right now on social media. Every day I get up and I see a Sushant Singh Rajput story. Everybody has become a CBI official. Everybody has become a police official. Everybody has become a detective. It's a free for all. Everybody's giving their opinion. Imagine the mental trauma it must have unleashed on the stakeholders in this case. So as much as social media has democratized the space for everybody to have their opinion, it has also unleashed these wild voices upon us that intimidate us into silence. So I'll keep it short.
Oh, wow. Amazing. 1 minute 42 seconds. Thank you so much. You are an anchor's delight, Rana. Thank you so much. All right. Yashika Dutt now speaks against the motion. Again, the topic: in a democracy, social media does more harm than good. But before I come to you, Yashika, just a quick reminder for all our viewers. This broadcast is also being beamed on our online platforms, and you can actually vote who you think is the best speaker in this panel. The more votes obviously means more popularity of that particular opinion. I think.
Spoken for another minute.
Don't worry, you can make that appeal yourself also in your interventions. Yashika, your time begins now.
Thank you, Sanket. So if this was 1993, we'd be standing behind hazy screens discussing if cable TV does more harm than good in a democracy. If this was 67, we'd be talking if television was a threat to the democratic process. In 30s, it would be radio. Anytime a technology is introduced that brings humanity closer, helps us understand each other better, we hear the same question: is it bad for democracy? And the answer almost always is this: no. And yes, social media is how falsehoods spread like fire alarms on WhatsApp that led to the brutal public murder of Muhammad Akhlaq. It was on the same platform where fake narratives of child abductors led to the violent killings of Nilotpal Das and Abhijit Nath in Assam. Lies on Facebook not only skewed the 2016 US presidential election, but also led to the election of the right-wing authoritarian Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. But it was also on social media that we saw the historic Arab Spring protests in 2011, or the more recent Black Lives Matter protests in the US in the middle of a pandemic through lockdowns and curfews. And it is because of social media that I'm here today sharing the platform with all of you. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, I remember you gave the coronation address at St. Stephen's in my second year in college, the incomparable Raghu Karnad, and fearless Rana Ayub. Only 4 years after I came out as a Dalit on Twitter. To me, social media is the greatest equalizer for marginalized voices, which until now were choked by systems that are built to keep us outside. Dalits, after centuries of erasure and neglect, have finally found our voices online. It was through messaging systems and emails that we educated, agitated, and organized, like Ambedkar asked us to. Or in the US, it is on Instagram where Black creators have been able to shatter the walls that have kept the creativity and talent in captivity. And it's on TikTok where Gen Z teens mobilized very recently to thwart President Trump's election rally and succeeded. I agree with what Rana said earlier. It's because of human intent that these tools of information are amplifying how we think about information, whether it's good or bad. These are the patterns that we see around us in real life, and they simply get duplicated online. And that's why I asked the viewers to vote against the motion and direct our attention to the people around us who are more susceptible to falling prey to misinformation. And that is what we need to do to stop us into a freewheeling descent into chaos like we are right now. And that mobilization also, a bulk of that can only happen on social media.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Yashika, for that opening comment. We now begin what is truly the crucial interjection and debating round of India debates. And I would like to begin with Rana Ayub, who spoke the least in her opening comments. So Rana, you go first. You've heard what Yashika has had to say and Dr. Tharoor has had to say. As technology grows, so do the challenges around the technology, because we are trying to get used to this new platform. But it does perhaps more good. It's just that we don't talk about its good and we just get too affected with the negative. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, at this point of time, Sanket, there is more negative. There is more harm that social media and various platforms, whether it is WhatsApp, whether it is Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it is Twitter, that has really unleashed on the Indian democracy. We are winning elections on the basis of fake news that is being disseminated on social media. So, for instance, I mean, we have had something like Alt News and Boom Fact Check and various fact checking websites at this point of time, only to kind of dispel the myths that exist around us. Once a fake news is spread on social media, and it spreads far and wide. A fact-checking website will not go to the rural areas in India where this news has already been disseminated and spread and accepted as the truth. So as much as it has democratized opinions, as much as it has amplified the voice of well-meaning people, it has also amplified the voices of those who do not mean well, who want to impose their majoritarian ideas and agendas on social media. So if any sane person wants to give an opinion, that person is intimidated by abusive language, that person is intimidated by death threat. I mean, I remember Gauri Lankesh, I remember just 3 days before she died, she wrote on my Facebook page, because I wrote about some death threats that came to me, and I wrote about it in social media. And she said, babe, they're nincompoops. Don't even think about it. There was just, in real life, we have to be strong. And everybody says, online does not go offline. And we saw in Gauri Lankesh's case that online soon became offline, and they shot her to death. Because most of the times we were believing that, oh, come on, it's just on social media. The cops who I went to meet 3 weeks ago said, but madam, ये threat तो सिर्फ आपको कोई घर पे आके तो नहीं मारा ना. They do not realize the trauma that it unleashes on people. This, now, when I write an article or whenever I write a post, I keep in mind what the kind of response it would elicit from people. I do not have to be bound by these constraints. As a writer, as a journalist, we are not to be bound by these constraints on how social media will react. Will there be a social media trend against me? Will there be a hate campaign unleashed against me? In 2013, Sanket, I wrote a piece against Mr. Modi and Amit Shah. For 2 days, there was a Twitter hashtag, Rana Ayub Sex CD. Now, for about a week, I actually went about introspecting what wrong have I done. I did not. I just spoke my voice. I just spoke about my story, and that's it. So it can intimidate people into silence.
Okay.
So we have developed, as journalists,
I don't think anyone can.
But not everybody has a thick skin.
Sure, not everyone has a thick skin, and that should not be a disqualification for being on social media. I mean, I can be thin-skinned, be affected, and yet be on social media, deserve decency on social media. Dr. Tharoor, would you like to come in on that? I don't think anyone can disagree with what Rana said. I mean, you don't need to normalize bigotry, normalize indecency, just because this is a free space and anyone can say whatever they want.
I agree, and I do want to say that I have deep sympathy for Rana and for all that she's been through. And indeed, many other females on social media space have suffered terribly, as have some males, and I would like to submit myself as Exhibit A in some respects for the kind of abuse and vitriol I take daily on social media. But the fact remains that while all these are terrible things, and I certainly don't want to in any way extenuate social media of any blame and harm, I do want to say that specifically the question remains, does this do more harm than good? I was giving you some examples of good. Yashika has added a very important one about how an outsider's voice, a marginalized voice, got national and international prominence. The other examples, social media has enabled individuals from tier 2 and tier 3 cities to actually monetize some of their talents. And people from financially vulnerable backgrounds who made money from their content on platforms like TikTok. Okay, we don't have TikTok anymore, but the idea is very much that social media gave them an avenue they didn't have before. There's no doubt there are scholars like Yasha Monk at Harvard who says that social media weakens the power of insiders, strengthens the power of outsiders. Now that in turn leads to my third point, the extraordinary use of social media in highlighting dissent and facilitating protests against absolutely authoritarian states. You're seeing it, you've already seen it with the so-called Jasmine revolutions in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria. We've also seen it, of course, in Iran during the presidential election disputes that we're seeing in Hong Kong today, where regimes are finding it difficult to crack down on movements on social media because they would literally have to kill the social media to prevent it happening. And so in Hong Kong's crisis right now, the demonstrations are largely leaderless because led demonstrations can be dealt with emergency style. You lock up the leaders. Here you've got decentralized actions, activists using social media to coordinate and mobilize anonymously. And so the ever expanding and all powerful Chinese surveillance state hasn't been able to crack down on that. There was an incident when the Chinese tried to suppress news of a major Uyghur revolt, but some American tourist filmed on his mobile phone from his hotel window the Chinese shooting and clubbing and killing people. And when he traveled out of China, he released it to the world. And that's how the news came out. So you see it as a very powerful democratizing force, and democracy is in your title. And you're seeing this in the Black Lives Matter movement. You saw it in the Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act protest, the tremendous stuff that happened. Fourth case, institutions of governance have become much more accountable and responsive than ever before. Power used to be with bureaucrats, ministers, and senior officials who are remote, inaccessible figures. They've become demystified, they're accessible, you can reach them directly. And indeed, as a result, our institutions in India have evolved and become more democratic because the citizen has a platform to highlight his or her concerns. Look at the way in which the railway social media handles have helped thousands of citizens because of their complaints. Look at the way in which the External Affairs Ministry has helped citizens in distress abroad because of social media complaints. I've had, during the pandemic, we've had politicians reaching out across all the lockdown constraints. I've had somebody in Nagaland writing to me saying, I've got some people from my constituency stranded in Kerala. Can you help them? They have no food, they have no place to stay, etc. And not just Nagaland, half a dozen states, Bihar, Maharashtra, elsewhere. And we were able to help because social media spanned the divide.
I think
Governments and institutions are building public trust. And finally, humanitarian uses, going back to the Haiti earthquake, people asking for blood for people in need. All of these, the pandemic situation, I myself have been asked on social media to record messages in Hindi and Bengali for migrant workers in Kerala speaking those languages so they could see and receive assurances on their mobile
No,
phones.
absolutely.
They didn't need to go back to
No, Dr. Tharoor, see,
so
no one's-
all this good cannot be overlooked against, say, the kind of harassment
That's true. But the way the harassment happens, the way the harassment has been emboldened because of this new platform is, I guess, the cause of worry. Because, you may do 10 good things, but then if someone's getting killed, someone's getting rape threats, I think the social media platform will just amplify this problem further. And the pain and agony it causes that one person. I mean, yes, Yashika, Yashika at the beginning in her opening comments said that we would have had the same problem. We would have held television responsible in the 80s. We would have held radio responsible in the 30s and the 40s. Do you think that we're overlooking very consciously at the positives of social media just because the bad things that it does are far more amplified?
I think I would actually like to respond and push back to all of the points, to multiple points that Dr. Tharoor and Ms. Dutt have made. And let me just start by saying, yes, it's true. It's true that too many voices have been excluded historically and in the present from the industries that I'm defending and from the professions that I'm defending. I know it very well. What I want, what I would love to see, and what those voices deserve is to be included and to have their say within these professions. They deserve to have access to these norms, to these resources. They deserve to have the same credibility that we have as professional journalists, and to have the same protection as professionals, and to have their truth and their stories credentialed the way that professional stories are credentialed. Now, this won't happen if newspapers and other sources of good information are destroyed, which is actively happening to most legitimate and responsible sources of news in the world, and including in this country. What will happen instead is that the most vulnerable will be left to speak their truth in an arena of aggression and abuse and threat of legal exposure and physical danger without the benefit of institutional backing. As a journalist who works with The Wire and also someone who tweets on his own, I know the crucial difference that institutional backing provides when it comes to your own safety, your own confidence, and your own courage to speak the truth. So meanwhile, a competing, heavily funded network of bigotry and distortion is doing its own work and is always going to be able to shout much louder. So this is the second point. Social media has sold us on the delusion that everyone's information is equally good. I'm going to say something very unpopular. Everyone's information in general, in the abstract, is equally bad. Now, Dr. Tharoor has said that everyone should be a reporter and everyone should be an editor. I disagree. Only people let me just say that information has to be refined. It has to be mediated not by a government, but by professionals who can cross-check and supervise and improve each other's work and each other's standards. The third point, which comes to what you asked, Sanket, is that social media is not all technology. We're not debating whether technology itself is good for mankind or for humanity and for democracy. And this is not an argument I'm making against technology. It's an argument against a specific design of social media. Social media platforms have their own values, their own best practices that contrast from the best practices I described. These are aimed only at creating more addicted, emotionally agitated users and extracting our data for profit. They are also indifferent to accuracy or inaccuracy or to the mental health or well-being of those users.
In the name of liberty. In the name of liberty, is it?
In the name of liberty and of free speech, which is very important, but it's not as simple as social media companies would like us to be.
Okay, I think that's a very, very significant assessment. Who wants to answer this? I think Yashika, would you like to respond? See, I think from what I gather after listening to all of you is that you're not necessarily in disagreement with one another. It's just that there is a flaw which needs to be corrected, otherwise things are fine.
Sure, that's exactly what my point is, Sanket. I agree with Raghu that there is a lot of bad information out there. But let's be very specific about what we're talking about here. Orkut, MySpace, and WhatsApp inherently are not a threat to democracy. Fascism, authoritarianism, and religious fundamentalism always have been a threat to democracy, and still are. There was no Facebook in Nazi Germany. Yet, those forces of power found easy ways to polarize a segment of people to the extent of murderous hatred, much like what we see today. So that's why what we need are criticism and scrutiny of the capitalist surveillance structures of these tools. I think on that sense, you're right, Sanket, we are in agreement. We need to hold Facebook accountable. We need to hold Twitter accountable. So instances that have happened with Rana, that continue to happen to so many women, including myself, the threats that we receive online, they can be curbed. So the idea is to not to do away with these structures, but to hold them accountable in a way where they are answerable to us, not to shut out entire systems and keep our voices out. Because what I do want to say is, sure, a lot of journalists, we do have our voices and information does need to be refined. But until now, that didn't happen, did it? I mean, you didn't hear about the Dalit narrative till 2016. And why was that? Let's examine. It's because Rohit Vemula's last letter went viral online, where on Facebook, on Twitter, on social media. And I understand the company that I'm in and the platform I'm on, but when mainstream media realized that this information is too important to ignore, that is when they started paying attention. It's not that mainstream media willingly opened its gates to Dalit journalists, Dalit reporters, or marginalized voices. We had to come here and take that power in our own hands. Dalit Twitter, Dalit social media, Dalit information systems have existed. Post-Mandal Commission in the 90s, there was a mobilization movement that took place. It was pretty much on the same level that took place after Rohit Vemula's death. But what we saw was not the same kind of impact. The reason that we had this impact that we've had today is because social media existed. And I completely agree with everybody. These are terrible systems. They don't work in our favor. They definitely don't work in the favor of marginalized voices. But are they working for us right now? Absolutely. And we need to keep pushing them better because, like I mentioned earlier, power is not ceded. It has to be taken. And when I say that, what I mean is that marginalized voices have to fight and wrestle for this power for centuries. And only now we have our voices.
Social media has provided this platform.
Okay, it's the greatest equalizer.
It's an equalizer, it's a leveler, but it's got to be better. I guess that's the point that everyone seems to be making. But Dr. Tharoor, do you think there lies the basic problem? How do you see social media is like it's free flowing water. It's free flowing. The moment you try to build dams of sanity, right, there will be a problem, because then it will not be free. It will be seen as anti-free, Dr. Tharoor.
That's exactly the point. The fact is that we undoubtedly are looking at a medium that has multiplied the avenues for communication, multiplied the voices that can be heard, reduced the effectiveness and power of the official arbiters of information, of those like governments that seek to control it, those like elites, class groups, gatekeepers who try and restrict it or shape it to their taste. And as a result, you've seen an explosion of voices. Some of them have been reprehensible. And as I say, I have a lot of sympathy for what both Raghu and Rana have said. And Rana has suffered a lot, and we don't want her to have to endure what she's had to endure. But the fact still is, in the balance of this debate, what does more harm than good is the charge. And I would argue this does more good than harm. It does harm, but it does more good because it opens up the space. It gives so many people opportunities who never had opportunities before. It weakens the power of the establishment, undoubtedly, and it also actually gives us hope.
So, Dr. Tharoor, would you not agree, Dr. Tharoor, that this is a medium which is unlike any other in the past? It's not like radio, it's not like TV. It is the first of a interactive medium that we have seen because of the internet. It's its very nature which makes it liberating as well as dangerous.
So it's actually unprecedented in both those. But one is that it's interactive. So it's not like Akashvani or Doordarshan giving you a message top down. You too can come back to it, ask questions, and put your own message out. But the second thing is it's accessible because it's essentially free. I mean, once you've got sunk in your basic capital cost of a phone, though even that you don't need, you can go to an internet cafe if you like and access the internet. Once you've done that, you are free to broadcast. Whereas in the past, to actually have a television station or a radio channel, my gosh, can you imagine the amount of investment and resources you needed access to have your voice heard? So it became impossible for everyone but a very, very small elite. This is why this is so good for democracy. It has democratized the world. There are bad things that have also come, and particularly have come to the surface. The scum always floats to the top. But beneath, there's a bubbling, vivacious energy of ordinary people finding their voice.
But many of these platforms, Rana, I want to come to you. Many of these platforms have been accused. For instance, Facebook has invited so much criticism in the United States of exploiting the human mind, of basically tinkering with dopamine releasing effects, that they would egg you on to search for yourself. They would egg you on to want more likes. The point that Raghu was making just a short while ago, it's exploitative. So will they ever want to be bound by any rules or regulations? Because they'll always turn against you and say, well, it's against free speech. Why do we have to accept these rules?
Sanket, I do not agree with social media, the fact that it should be a level playing field, because then you are in a way placing my truth with that of a troll on social media whose only job is to sit there on Twitter and Facebook and disseminate fake news about say some sadhu in Palghar who has been lynched by Muslims, and by the time you give your version of the truth, that version has already been accepted as the truth. So it cannot be a level playing field between me and a troll. As far as social media and the enablers, I mean, I think so. I personally believe that social media and Twitter have been the enablers of fascism in authoritarian regimes, whether it's India, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's Philippines. Sheryl Sandberg changes her display picture to Narendra Modi when Narendra Modi visits the Facebook headquarters, when there are numerous complaints about, when Modi, when BJP workers or, when Modi supporters, when they kind of amplify their stories on social media, especially Facebook, and when they kind of promote their story, that is allowed. But the moment I kind of amplify the story, I kind of promote that story, a paid advert, it does not happen. The moment it's a story critical of Modi, I cannot amplify my story. It has been taken off on many occasions.
That's exactly the problem.
So on many occasions, I've heard that from my colleague Maria Ressa in Philippines, that Facebook and Twitter have been used as as a tool to kind of stifle voices that are critical of the regime.
But then you'll be accused of being elitist. You'll be accused of creating an exclusive platform for yourself. You know, a Yashika will turn around and say that's exactly why Dalits suffer.
No, I think
Because of
it's not
exclusivity in a
You
platform.
know what, Sanket? I think everybody on this platform is in borderline agreeing and disagreeing with each other. It's not about my truth or Yashika's truth. There's a fact that yes, there are pros and cons, and in this case, the cons outweigh, the advantages of social media. The fact that a Sheryl Sandberg and a Mark Zuckerberg are actually aligning with those with those in power, and not having a check and balance, to ensure that Twitter becomes a sane place for discussion.
Sure.
It's a
Raghu and
political
Yashika.
platform.
Raghu and Yashika, let me ask you one by one. You've seen, Yashika, I'm going to come back to you. Raghu, how do you fix accountability? See, obviously, in all the previous mediums also, whether it's radio, whether it's newspaper, whether it's television channels, they're bound by regulations. Sometimes they're self-regulated, otherwise they're regulated by the government. Unofficially regulated, as a lot of people seem to be suggesting about TV, but there is regulation. Here is a platform which is essentially free for all. Now, the moment you impose restrictions or rules or regulations, anything which is restrictive, it defeats the purpose of that platform. It does not remain what it's supposed to be. Do you see that as a problem?
Yes. Sanket, I want to say that that you said that we're all more or less agreeing with each other. I want, for the interest of this debate and of this motion, I want to emphatically disagree and say, Yashika suggested that we should be pushing platforms to be better. I disagree. I'm going to argue that we should be pushing to escape their influence altogether. All right. Now, coming to what you said about the possibility of regulation and what Dr. Tharoor said about these platforms being essentially free. Now, there's a very important comment someone once made, which is that if someone offers you something for free, you're not the customer, you're the product. And so it is with social media. And that's precisely the reason why effective regulation is never going to take place, because it's expensive, it's difficult, it has political costs for these corporations, and it eventually restricts the data, which is the real reason, that is the underlying reason for their design. Now, we learned a few years ago about, in the Cambridge Analytica expose, that our data will be weaponized against us, to manipulate us, and to hijack our democratic processes. That news is 5 years old. That's yesterday's technology. We are already under the influence of Cambridge Analytica 2.0, and we don't know what it is, and we won't be allowed to find out until someone, a whistleblower, chooses to tell us. That's why social media is this playground for manipulation and for polarization and for control. Yes, marginalized voices will get a new space to speak, but the net advantage, the final victory, will always go to those who have the most resources and the most power to defend and the least scruples in doing so. And that is why social media ultimately serves authoritarians and it serves extremists.
Which is exactly the analysis that people would have of television, of radio, of newspaper. You have money, you control opinion.
If you're coming back to me, then I will say that those are all true, but they do not deserve to be credentialed as news. And this is the important part, without demonstrating professional practices. And it is very important for consumers to be educated about what professional practices mean. They are not about whether you're left wing or right wing, whether you're a nationalist or a human rights advocate. They are about professional principles that apply regardless, and credential your information as good information and as news.
Yashika, would you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I do have to agree with Raghu at some point. Cambridge Analytica data is concerning. And of course, I agree, we are the product. But also, I think we have to understand that these systems, and Sanket, what you said earlier, social media is free-flowing. It's actually not free-flowing. freedom of speech does not mean freedom of abuse. We cannot condone what happened with Rana. We could not condone what happens to millions of people who are marginalized, whether it's women, whether it's trans people, whether it's any other marginalized community. But that is why these regulations are important. And I do agree, it's going to be challenging. People don't have the political will, and there are corporations who it is in their interest to have our data out there. But does that mean that we stop trying? Does that mean that we completely give up on this idea and then say, well, this society cannot be fixed, let's burn it all? I don't think that is the way forward, because we cannot roll back social media. We have moved ahead in our human evolution, so to speak. We have to keep going forward. And another point that I'd like to make is that as societies, we are living in this time. We have to be more limber. We have to be forward thinking. We have to anticipate these shifts before they happen. And we have to come from a spirit of collectivism and empathy. People are falling prey to misinformation. Of course, there are paid trolls and there are bad actors, and people with resources are always going to fund this kind of information. But like I said earlier, authoritarianism does not need Facebook. It has always survived. It will always find ways to get to us. It will always find ways to control us. But we have to constantly push back. And that's really the only option that we have. We have to, as a society, understand these shifts. We don't have to perhaps wait for a whistleblower to tell us what's going on. We have to rise up to the level that we understand how these systems work. Even from 3 years ago and where we are now, the understanding for social media has evolved. And that has to continuously keep happening, because doing away with the platform and rolling back progress is not how we can move forward.
Okay. Thank you so much, all of you all, for this free-flowing interjection. I would say you've been very, very good panelists. You've not gone for the jugular in many ways, but let's now quickly take closing comments as we hit part 3 of this conversation. Closing comments from each of you panelists on what you gathered. Have we been able to take some solutions at the end of this debate? Let's begin in the order that we began. So Raghu Karnad goes first. 2 minutes time allotted for the closing comments in this section. I would like to urge our audience, people who are watching, once again, who do you think spoke the best? Who do you think deserves your vote? Please do vote for that person. Raghu Karnad, you go first.
Thank you, Sanket, and thank you all of the rest of you. I spoke at the beginning about the professional standards and practices that give us good information. I think it's important to re-emphasize that social media is de-educating us about the nature of good information. The norms and the practices that inform all sorts of professions, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a historian, whether you're a journalist, whether you're a different kind of researcher, these norms are well known, well understood, and they are what distinguishes quality work from the luck of the draw. And that is something we cannot abandon as we inform our society and as we inform our democracy. Social media, again, has its own values, its own best practices, which are heightened emotion, popularity, virality, and these are fundamentally indifferent to accuracy and inaccuracy. What they are designed to do is to drive engagement and extract our data with consequences in the future, consequences that involve our manipulation. This is a feedback loop. It's not just a one-way transfer of information, which we cannot understand and which we should genuinely fear. Democracy is synonymous with a regime that's accountable to good information, where good information actually prevails. A regime that answers to viral information, I don't want to find out what that looks like. So I urge everyone to please vote for the motion and to understand that social media does more harm than good to our democracy.
All right. Nicely said. You know, this is often said in journalism also, that there is a difference between what is right and what is popular. So just because you're getting a lot of TRPs, you can't justify the popular as the right. So that's the model that we here at NDTV follow, that be right, not necessarily what is actually popular. Leave that for the politicians. Dr. Tharoor, Speaking of politicians, your closing comments?
I must say, I listened to Raghu and Rana attentively. And I want to tell them that, frankly, there is a real issue with the arguments they're making. When Raghu says, for example, you are the product, they're exploiting you, Rana, and so on. The fact is, you are the product, perhaps, of what you say and you choose to do. Whereas under conventional media, you're merely the object of what an editor decides you should be getting. I find that the democratizing element of social media has worked even in a totally benign, non-viral setting. Like, for example, when I was Minister of State for External Affairs and I went to Africa, the mainstream media was simply not interested. My visit to Liberia was the first Indian ministerial visit in 38 years. I was the first minister anywhere to get to Haiti in the aftermath of the earthquake. But the fact is, they were completely ignored in the mainstream media. And it was only through my Twitter, social media updates that people even knew about this effort of India's African diplomacy and our contribution to Haiti's relief efforts and our brave Indians there who helped in so many ways to cope with the tragedy there. That's just one example. Social media demystifies what the elite wants to keep to themselves. I'm not a great fan of mainstream media either. I think we find a situation where if you follow social media, you're sometimes misinformed, and if you follow only mainstream media, you're uninformed. So you're not really winning either way. You need all of these and as I said, the key issue that the proposition has failed to establish is that social media does more harm than good. I've given you 5 major types of examples with many examples within them of how social media does good. They've given us a couple of examples of how it does harm. And I'm sorry that they've had bad experiences or that there's bad things happening. But the fact is they have not actually been able to establish that the good things social media does are not worth having. It has completely opened up the space for communication. It has democratized access for people, for voices that were not heard before. It has given us new levels of transparency and accountability. And therefore, I would argue that despite all the failings that the proposition has identified, undoubtedly, social media has done more good than the harm that it may have done.
Sure. So in the closing comments, we've had Raghu and Dr. Tharoor who have spoken. So please keep the votes going. Who do you think made a very, very compelling argument? Rana Ayub next. Rana Ayub.
I was listening to Dr. Tharoor right now, and this is not about what me and Raghu or what Yashika have gone through on social media. These are just personal examples to give to the audience. Just go to Twitter right now, Dr. Tharoor, and see the Twitter trends. They are manipulating public opinion for and against people. I keep going back to the example of Sushant Singh Rajput, whose suicide has been made a spectacle of sorts, where vultures from all sides are kind of feeding into misinformation of all sorts. The unfortunate bit is somebody who has 1 million followers, his truth is considered more acceptable as compared to somebody who would have 200 followers, whose truth would be more objective. And that's why, unfortunately, the truth on social media is now being accepted as the only truth. Truth on social media, Twitter trends are now dictating news channel headlines. And Sanket would agree with that. If there's a Twitter trend that goes on trending the entire day, it will find mention on 8 p.m. prime time. Whereas there's something that's happening right now about farmer suicides, about poverty, about starvation. It's something that will not see the light of the day. It will not see primetime discussions. But for the last 3 days, we are having Sushant Singh Rajput discussions on our television channels when the priority of this country should be something else. So I think social media has done more damage than kind of amplifying the voices of the less privileged in the country, as we have kind of, made that argument quite often.
All right. Yashika, now your final comments. 2 minutes time. But because Rana has been extra kind to always finish early, you get 30 seconds extra.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Rana. So I want to say I agree with Rana and what you said about Sushant Singh Rajput's death and the spectacle that has been made out of that. But let us roll back a little bit and think about where that spectacle is happening. It's not happening on social media. It's happening on our mainstream news channels. And, you need to think about who's spreading authoritarianism, who's spreading falsehoods, who's spreading fake news. All you have to do is push a few buttons on your remote right now, the viewers who are watching, and you'll probably, you'll get to a news channel which is telling you something that's completely false. And I don't think we can categorize that as social media. That is always going to be mainstream television. And I agree with Dr. Tharoor's point. We are, until now, we were the recipients of one-way information. We were objects. We were, we did not have a voice. And to the points that Raghu and Rana made earlier, sure, misinformation is being spread, and sure, it's important for us to have accurate information. But let's also not forget, social media is not just about journalism. I say that as a journalist myself. Social media is about, a democracy, in fact, is about having voices. And that's what social media does. Social media gives people a voice. Like the example that Rana mentioned about farmer suicides. Where did we first see that information? On social media. When the Dalits who were flogged in Una, that video would have been completely ignored by the mainstream news channels, and it was. Where did it get traction? It got traction on social media. We need these systems to keep running so that people who are outside the system can at least have a chance. The societies that we have built, especially in India, are built to have power within a few people's hands. And what social media is doing is giving the rest of us a chance to get in. And that's why we cannot completely do away with this system. What I want to urge everybody to think about, and especially our listeners, is to think about how we can evolve as a society, how we can, and like I mentioned earlier, I do go back to this point again, how can we hold these big tech giants accountable? And what is the way for us to move forward? Because if it's social media today, it's going to be some other technology tomorrow. This cycle is not going to stop. Whether it's TV, cable television, radio, and now social media, there will be AI. Then we'll be discussing whether AI and videos that are doctored are good for social media or not. What we need to constantly do is think about the dangerous threats of these tools of information before it gets to us. We have to be forward thinking in a way that we get to these issues before they get to us. And that is why I would urge your viewers to vote against the motion. Social media does not do more harm than good in a democracy. All it does is give people like us a voice, you a voice.
Okay. Thank you so much for making such compelling points, the four of you. We leave it to the judgment of our viewers. The very fact that we are carrying out a poll is also public opinion, which means what opinion people think is actually popular. You can see Raghu there urging people, requesting them. Any poll sop, Raghu, for your people?
If you vote for me, I'll reply to each one of your tweets.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you
so much. That's possible on social media.
Absolutely. And it's possible on social media. Well said. All right. Thank you so much to Rana Ayub, Raghu Karnad, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, as well as Yashika Dutt for participating in the first of a series of debates of NDTV and Roli Books called India Debates. It was a pleasure to host this first debate with the four of you. Thank you so much.